Archbishop Viganò. At other times, De Mattei would have been proud to be at my side in the common battle for the Catholic truth, for the defense of the immutable magisterium and of the venerable traditional liturgy against the assaults of the modernists. He would have probably also been at my side in denouncing the pandemic fraud and the intrinsic immorality of experimental vaccines produced with fetal material derived from abortions. His recent interventions, published with his name or under a pseudonym, have demonstrated, not without heartfelt sorrow, that if there is a double, it must be sought in the recent writings of the professor, writings that seem to be composed by a dull regime official who is obedient to the mainstream narrative, and not by the sharp mind of genuine faith of the De Mattei I once knew. Carlo Maria Viganò. So there's actually a little bit of a twist here. Archbishop Viganò says if there's anyone who has a double, he says it's De Mattei, because De Mattei was illustrious, he was such a great historian, and now he says that his writings, particularly, I guess, with regard to the vaccines, I assume that's what I don't assume he's talking about the new book on Pius V. I assume he's talking about the vaccines, is composed by a, quote, dull regime official who is obedient to the mainstream narrative. So there's definitely some friction. I guess you could say I'm a student or a scholar of Viganò. I've read everything he's written, as far as I know. I've studied his history. I've spoken to him many times. I feel like I know who he is, and I've done a lot of commentary on it, so I feel qualified in talking about it. I wanted to just go into the recent history of Archbishop Viganò, and I think when you understand what's happened in the last 3.5 years, the narrative makes sense. And I think what Professor Roberto De Mattei is saying is, I think in a way, the history of the last 3.5 years gives an account for what Roberto De Mattei is noticing. So if you go into the recent history, everything explodes in July, August of 2018. This is the summer of shame. This is when we learn that the rumors about Cardinal McCarrick being a pedophile, being a homosexual, being an embezzler, using his power as a priest, a bishop, an archbishop, and a cardinal, he had used it and abused it to prey on other people. We also found out around this time, thanks to Archbishop Viganò, that he was involved in negotiations with the Catholic Church in China. All of this broke out July, August, started in New York. I think maybe, if I remember correctly, the first big article was in the New York Times. And it had to do with some of the interventions made by Cardinal Dolan. But then the fireworks, the nuclear explosion that rippled throughout the Catholic Church and beyond happened. The date of the letter was August 25th, 2018. That was the first Viganò statement. It was 11 pages long. I remember when it came out. I remember being blown away.
This is not some minor player. This is the former apostolic nuncio to the United States. When I was first made a bishop, I met my first meeting, and it was Archbishop Viganò who rose to speak to us on behalf of the Pope.
Here was the first time that Catholic lay people saw with their eyes what was happening in the corridors of Vatican City, what was going on in the Apostolic Palace. And of course, all Catholic lay people have been constantly wondering, why did Benedict XVI resign? What happened? What were the motives? What were the conditions? What was going on? And here we start to see beyond the curtain. When we moved into 2020 and we started having the COVID crisis, and we also, let's remember, moved into an election year. And in 2020, we started to observe many Catholics, including myself, including Archbishop Viganò, speaking about COVID, health, lockdown, masks. Vaccines weren't really on the radar towards the fall. and the election. The Trump situation, the presidential election, and the COVID, in a way, not in a way, it did. It really fractured and broke apart all of us on that right side. We all know that from friendships to collaborations to all those things fractured, broken, because people had different stances on what they would say in public or what they wouldn't say, or different degrees on should we be going to mass, should we be staying home, should we be going to masses out in the barns, in the fields, should we go, should we be wearing masks at all? And then also, should we sit out this election because both candidates are really not Catholic, even though Biden says he is? Or should we get active in the campaign and try to promote Trump? And then we all know what happened after that. So I think the fact that Professor Roberto De Mattei is living in Italy and that Archbishop Viganò, although he's Italian, he deeply understands the American heart, the American mind, American Catholicism, and he speaks to that constantly. I can see how people watching Archbishop Viganò from the outside would say, it seemed that in the middle of 2020, Archbishop Viganò became another person. He became a double. There was Archbishop Viganò, the papal nuncio, the insider in D.C. and Rome, who's an ecclesiastical reformer, and now there's Archbishop Viganò, the double, and he's a commentator on American politics, President Trump, the COVID pandemic, vaccines, masks, and then also, I didn't mention this, in 2020, we start seeing Archbishop Viganò having references to liturgy and talking more about the traditional Latin Mass. That's actually continued and grown in 2021. Same man, same convictions, but we had in 2020 perhaps one of the most monumental shifts in American history, global history, 2020. A lot of people sat at home, a lot of Catholic thought leaders, intellectuals. And I think one of the reasons why I like Viganò is he's kind of a cowboy, kind of Texan. And he doesn't, so many bishops will have committees and meetings and how do we respond? And Archbishop Viganò will put out a statement within hours responding. And I guess that's a little bit more my personality type.